Welcome to 1984 Law, and today I delve into the realm of educated speculation and consider the question of whether Oceania, like many things in the 1984 universe, is simply a lie. Many fans over the decades since the book's publication have speculated that Airstrip 1 is Oceania, that is, the only territory directly controlled by the party. Though nothing definitive can be concluded, I believe I have found in-universe indications that answer this question. However, before I reveal this law evidence, and for those not familiar with this popular theory, why do some believe that the party does not in fact control the vast territories it claims it does? Well, the idea simply stems from the nature of the society itself, specifically the ironclad grip on all information, as well as past records and news that confirms as such, but can reasonably be doubted given the deceptive nature of the party. As O'Brien infamously explains later on in the novel, the party's epistemology is based on consensus as dictated by its leaders, hence the horrific demand that 2 plus 2 can equal 4, 5, both numbers or neither of these if that is what the party requires. Since no self-respecting totalitarian state can be seen as weak, the party's reality of its controlling a huge swathe of the globe makes sense. The geopolitical reality of the world, then, falls into this party reality, just like everything else. However, as Winston and we all know too well, what the party says and what actually is are often at odds. Winston, for example, is certain that the party's claim to have invented the aeroplane is false, as he clearly remembers it before he had even heard of Ingsoc or the party. Winston is also intimately involved through his job in directly changing reality on a daily basis. Since Winston and, as far as we know, no one in the novel outside of the inner party really travels much outside of London, let alone Airstrip 1, the true extent of the party's territory cannot be known for sure. Perhaps more subtle indications that the war, as understood, may not be entirely what it seems, and hence perhaps the true geopolitical situation too is a lie, comes at the beginning of Part 2, Chapter 5. Winston observes that, quote, "The rocket bombs crashed oftener than ever, and sometimes in the far distance there are enormous explosions which no one could explain, and about which there were wild rumours." In itself, this is no slam dunk, of course. It's just as possible both states of war are true. Perhaps the real war between the superstates waxes and wanes, and the government steps in from time to time, especially during particular periods in which it wants the proles triggered, such as Hate Week, and drops a few of its own bombs to provoke the appropriate response. Julia, later in the same chapter, astonishes Winston by casually suggesting that she doesn't believe there is any war, and that the bombs dropped are dropped by the government of Oceania itself. This, Winston thinks, was something he had simply never considered before. Another subtle indication this may at least be partially the case of the ministry buildings. It does strike me as convenient that these vast pyramidal structures, all 4 of which Winston claims can be seen simultaneously from the roof of his home, are not frequent targets of enemy bombing. Could it be that these key buildings are not struck precisely because it's not enemy bombs that are dropped, at least in the capital of the province anyway? Given the brutal nature of the party, this idea is certainly not unthinkable. There is no proof of this, of course, but if true, this does beg the question that if there is no war as described by the propaganda of the party, is the geopolitical reality it also describes a lie? Orwell in any case clearly wanted readers to consider the idea, given he had Julia suggest it. Unfortunately, however, for fans of this theory, I do believe there are strong indications that the world is roughly, if not precisely perhaps, as the party says it is, based on several things from the law. Firstly, in Goldstein's book, which O'Brien partially wrote and describes as true as description, the geopolitical situation is explained as historical fact, you may think that trusting the book is silly given how the party frequently lies. However, I think this particular description is likely true based on Ingsoc philosophy itself. Goldstein's book also explains how continuous war is essential to maintain the siege mentality that makes the societal structure of Winston's world possible. It serves to create an atmosphere of fear, as well as more practically to use up the surplus of its population's labour. By investing the lion's share of resources into maintaining a war, the party can maintain the poverty-stricken society as is, making it easier to control. Given this requirement of war for the very society to exist, it just seems more likely, given the balance of probabilities, that other states at least, if not the superstates as exactly described, do exist, that there is simply no reason to lie about this reality, especially if the reality is vital for the party to maintain absolute power. While it's true the world of 1984 is one of lies, it strikes me as daft to lie about everything if this truth happens to benefit the maintenance of the status quo. Another solid point in favour of Oceania as a superstate is in the prisoners we see. Winston himself describes some Eurasian prisoners being paraded in London en route to their execution in Part 2, Chapter 1. Described as mongoloid and then more recognisably European looking, there's no reason to doubt here that there is a war of some kind, the types of POWs even implying Eurasian recruitment in the territory it claims to have. We could fantasise that even this is all staged and that these are actors or something, but I feel this strays too far into crazy land, and there's no real reason to doubt Winston's perception here, and he's taking for granted that these POWs are Eurasian, that is, drawn from as far as Western Europe to the far east of the territory. Another fair point to make is that Winston clearly recalls several changes of allegiance during his own time. At least one of these, if not more, was likely in his adult life, and so we can reasonably assume that such parades and executions are fairly normal. Since Oceania usually wars with one or the other, Winston too must have witnessed Eastasian POWs in similar variety, with POWs from China, Japan and Korea, for example. For me, this is quite strong evidence for the reality of Oceania and its rivals as superstates, though obviously this is far from concrete. This too is also supported by Winston's assumption throughout the book, even after his capture, that this is the reality of the world. Winston frequently has to change details which involves dealing with geography and geopolitical facts. There's no real indication in the novel that he doubts this geopolitical reality even after Julia's observation in Part 2. Winston is permitted by O'Brien to ask anything after one of his sessions, and none of his questions are related to the geopolitical reality of the world. Given Winston's own obsession with true history and the truth in general, it seems out of character that he would not muse about this to himself, or ask O'Brien if this is the true geopolitical reality of the world, unless this simply doesn't occur to him, as he assumes the party truth on this issue is true. To summarise then, I see no reason to doubt the descriptive truth of Goldstein's book that explains the geopolitical reality of the world. Eurasia and Eastasia's existence makes sense given the motives of the party to maintain absolute power. We also have Winston's own assumption that Eurasia and Eastasia, as well as Oceania's other territories, exist. For example, he refers to New York when recalling the story of Jones, Aronson and Rutherford. And finally, we have the POWs themselves, clearly captives from across Eurasia, indicating Eurasia is a thing, and hence perhaps Oceania too. But what do you think? Do you remain unconvinced? Do you have any proof from the law either way? Let us all know in the comments, and thanks for listening to this fun theory video. And remember, Big Brother is watching you.